Here to introduce Bil Har here. He's in from Zscaler from Redwood City, California. And based on what I know of California, that's either Silicon Valley or Hollywood. One or the other.
Thank you. Definitely Silicon Valley. Thank you guys for coming this morning. I know that they've got a really tight schedule, so we're going to try and stay on target, on time. Today what I'm here to talk to you about is change. Fundamentally, change in our industry is very slow, even though we have lots of new stuff and next gens. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about change in the infrastructure. We're going to talk a little bit about change in the attack vectors and a little bit of change in the user population. First things though, the first step in change is becoming aware of our own bullshit. We in the industry are probably the worst at this. Next gen this, next gen that, all the other stuff. The reality is we are simply slapping new things on old architecture. Let's take a look at what state of the art was in 2010. 2010, you had some DNS services, you threw in a little next-gen firewall, some IPS, right? We're going to do a little prevention here. We're going to throw in some SSL proxy because we got to start decrypting, toss a load balancer in there to handle it, full AV at 100 meg, so we're really screaming along with our signatures. We're going to do some DLP because we got to stop stuff exfiltrating, but we know what that's like. And then we throw a sandbox or a series of sandboxes on top that does one file every 5 minutes. State of the art 2010. Right? Problem with this is we introduced all sorts of latency, single tenancy. The control, enforce, and logging systems for this infrastructure was massive. We had huge teams that had to run this type of infrastructure. Zip ahead 7 years, we virtualized everything. That's really the only change that we saw in the corporate infrastructure, was taking the same thing and virtualizing it. So what did? We got rid of the horizontal scaling problems and the hardware issues by big boxes, let it run. But we still had all the same problems around single tenancy, the separate control, enforcement, and logging, right? We had no single policy across all of it, and it was all different vendors as well, right? None of this stuff worked together. The user experience was horrific. I took this from one of my customers. This is what every click on the internet looked like for one of our customers. And this was a Global 1000, right? They would have to, every time they click, introduce 28 separate new hops before they hit the edge router. Imagine what the user experience is like when you have to add, I think it's still building, yeah? Still going. You have to add this every time you click something on the internet. And what have we done over the last 10 years? We've moved everything out to cloud, right? Everything's out there now, and everything's going through this. So it's no wonder that our user population gets really upset. And the one thing that we all know in security is if the users have a bad experience, they go around it. They either find a way around it, or they get it so far up the chain that you get a call from somebody with C in their title saying, punch a hole in it, split tunnel it, fix it, do something. This is not acceptable. So, the change in business that we've got. Who here hates the term cloud? Excellent. I've been in as a service probably since my first as a service company was started in 99. I like as a service because that tells you what you're getting. Software as a service, infrastructure as a service. At least the whole cloud thing was just a marketing term, but it's slapped all over everything and we have to deal with it. But the reality is, this cloud shift, this move to as-a-service functionality will affect $1 trillion in IT spend by 2020. $1 trillion, right? That is budget shifting, budget cuts, budget moves, whatever it is moving. We know. We see that over half of new software is alternative consumption. I love that term. Alternative consumption. They're just not, you're not getting CDs, you're not getting downloads and installing it on-prem anymore. And 81% of the 1,000 employee or larger companies out there are using, investigating, or testing on AWS. Just AWS. It's not Google Compute, that's not Azure, that's none of the other ones. 81% of them. This is moving out. It's cheap. It's cost effective. You get elasticity. You can use more when you need it. You can shrink it back when you don't. And that's what the budget guys love, right? That's the world that we have to now operate within. Mobility is another massive one. Everybody's got a smartphone, some sort of smartphone. A nice little lady actually was on the plane with me last night, had a flip open phone. I thought it was great. But this is what everybody's doing. We have over half of all mobile apps being created without coding. That's drag and drop app creation. You know who's going to start doing this? Marketing. Marketing will start building apps. Now, any developers here? How often do you check your libraries? Actually go through your libraries that you pull into your code? Not often? Yeah, no. We don't, because it's not efficient, right? We do have some trust in the libraries that we've built. Heartbleed was a beautiful example of that. We all trusted those libraries, and there was a hole in it, right? Imagine what's going to happen when somebody starts creating these modules where a marketing person can pull them all together, or a sales guy can pull them all together and create an app. Imagine what it's going to do. Encryption. Huge topic, especially when you get into the privacy side of this. Just to give you context for some of the numbers you'll see, Zscaler does cloud security. We took the stack, put it in the cloud. That's all I'm going to say about it. But we process 35 billion transactions a day. We see a lot of traffic. 25% of our customers will block unscannable files. To me, that is a ridiculously stupid number. That should be 100%. If you can't scan it, why do you allow it into your environment, right? It's like going to TSA, throwing your bag up, and saying, well, we're only going to look at one of every 4 is going to go through the X-ray machine. We'll just trust the other 3, because maybe, we don't want to look in them. A little bit better on password-protected files, which is kind of weird, but, for years, IT told users, don't send the password with the file, right? Send the password separate, SMS it, do something, and we drilled that into their heads. This is what they remember. So threat actors now send the file, send the password separately, and they go, wow, that seems like legitimate stuff, so I'm going to open it. 60% of our traffic, so the traffic we see, 60% is SSL encrypted. Go to Google, way higher, right? HTTPS, TLS, DNS over TLS. Traffic is moving to encrypted, right? Regardless of what you think of Edward Snowden and how he did what he did, he fundamentally changed our industry by accelerating the adoption of commercial-grade encryption to the average user, right? When the bill changed that allowed ISPs to sell your browsing data without your permission, how many people ran out and got VPNs? I mean, VPN became the name, the thing, the $35 unlimited bandwidth. Nobody asked who was on the other end of the VPN. It's a whole different story. But people were concerned, and they went for encryption. Which is no surprise, 38% of all malicious content goes through SSL, because corporate doesn't open it. And 56% of the APTs are using it for exfiltration as well. Why? Again, nobody's looking inside it. Opening SSL is expensive, it's hard, it's complicated, and there's a whole litany of legal issues that you have to deal with around it, and people are very cautious about doing it. So really, when you think about it, if you think about this cloud thing, if you think about the mobility and the SSL, you've got this, what I call the unholy trinity, or the Bermuda Triangle, where your data is going as a corporate environment, right? Because the reality is, this is somebody else's computer, it's somebody else's network, and it's somebody else's crypto, right? The data's sitting elsewhere, it's traversing networks that you can't look at, and when it is on your network, it's encrypted and you can't see into it. And that's the reality of what we deal with in corporate today. So if you look at the way the changes in attacks, right? This is now a more interesting, I think, side of things. Who remembers the old days? Right? The fun days, dumpster diving, where the biggest concern you had was whether they threw the coffee out with the paper and then you had to start scraping coffee grinds off. Right? That was the biggest thing. Shoulder surfing. Nowadays, this is what we get. It's as a service. I mean, if there's one thing that says cloud or as a service is a legitimate business model, is when threat actors start renting their stuff as a service, right? When they adopt the same methodologies. I really wish I could make some of this up, but the iSpy keylogger actually gives you, 3 different levels of what you can purchase at 25, 45, free updates. They will patch and update for you as well. They won't guarantee a non-infection, which I think is, part of a warranty that should be in there. Trojans today. Just in the idea of the fact that when you go to IPify, right? When you look up your IP, it's SSL encrypted. So the initial start of this whole thing, you don't get to look at. Most corporations will not look at it because they're not cracking SSL. And then everything that's going through there, right? You've got a full download, you've got a call out to the C2. It's all happening over SSL. Office documents are probably the most prevalent corporate document there is, and they're also weaponized. This one, I've got some respect for the way these guys are building this stuff, because truthfully, when you've got an Excel spreadsheet that can fingerprint a sandbox, that is really impressive. It really is. But this is what your average user in finance is having to deal with. It's a weaponized document. In this particular case, we've got it testing for, whether it's actually sitting in the VM or if it's sitting in a virtual environment, and then it's just going to act like a regular Excel spreadsheet until it gets out, and then it's going to start pulling something down. WannaCry was the same thing with the whole kill switch, right? That was a DNS test. They throw DNS queries into malware to look to see if they're in some sort of honeypot where the DNS is going to respond to everything, right? A lot of sandboxes will do that. They'll respond to every DNS query. So if it's got some really obnoxious, crazy string and it responds, it's in a sandbox. Ransomware. Legit software. This is getting worse and worse. I thought, when we found this one, we actually found CryptoWall 3 buried inside a piece of finance software. When you tell your users, only install what I tell you, only install it from where I tell you to get it, and please check this digital signature, there's nothing else they can do, right? And that's exactly what this was signed twice. But when you start to see what's continually happening, when you've got Avast or Kaspersky or any of the antiviruses, those ones can't even be checked by Sandbox because they light it up like a Christmas tree. They are technically malware when you look at them. This is what's happening. They're going farther and farther down the procurement chain. And that's what corporations have to start looking at, is the procurement process that they have, because they may be GE or they may be Boeing or somebody with trillions of dollars to spend and billions in security. And if they're outsourcing to a contractor or a vendor that is much smaller, mom and pop shop type thing, you're going to have problems, because that's where they'll look for the weakest link. So the targets in the attack. We used to have credit cards. Everybody's had a credit card compromised, I am sure. Nowadays, it's pretty common. It happens every, 3 months for me because I travel. You freaked out the first time it happened, right? The second time it happened, you were kind of annoyed. Nowadays, it's like, whatever, my bank's gonna have that card FedEx to me at whatever hotel I'm at overnight. It doesn't matter. I'm covered, right? And it's gotten to that point, right? The fact that we've actually seen some sites on the dark web doing BOGOs where you buy one, get one free on a credit card is just ridiculous. Like, buy one stolen credit card, you will get an equal or lesser value credit card for free. But that's what's happening, because they churn them so fast. There's just no value. We saw it move into that ransomware, and we're continuing to see this. This is where the money is. And if anybody ever asks, how do we know what the next threat is? Figure out where the money is. Where can you make money? If you wanted to make ransomware go away tomorrow, stop paying. As soon as you stop paying, ransomware is pointless. It costs them more at that point than it costs you, because you're not paying, and they go away. They'll come up with something else. But we will continue to pay. In fact, when you think like Nyana was probably the worst thing that could have happened to us in the industry, because when they agreed to pay $1 million in ransom, negotiated down from, I think it was $4.4 million, but they agreed to $1 million ransom, every script kiddie goofball on the internet with a Tor browser and a Bitcoin account is going to jump on the ransomware bandwagon thinking they can make $1 million and thinking that they're hidden and protected and all the other crap that goes with it. But that's what's going to continue to happen. We're going to continue to see this. It is just going to continue to churn. And on the personal information, longevity in data, right? Credit cards churn super fast. Try changing your social security number. It's difficult. It is really difficult. And if you try to change your medical history, it's impossible, right? And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for data that can stick, that can be useful, and that they can then sell and make money from. Back to ransomware. This is like, I'm going to have to start shoving that divider over to 2016, because 2016 was an interesting year for ransomware. There was a big churn. The numbers we've heard is anywhere between $650 million and $1 billion was made in ransomware. And 2017 is going to be worse. And at current rates, it appears to be worse. Who's dealing with Bad Rabbit right now? Right? The phone calls, the discussions, is it an issue? That's interesting. Very few hands went up. But the creativity that goes into this is impressive. I have to admit, Popcorn Flicks was particularly interesting. You know, if anybody's familiar with it, it was if you get infected, you either pay or you infect 2 of your friends, and if they pay, you get yours free. Yeah. Who here doesn't have like an aunt or a grandmother that they could, you want to pay that. You're infected, you better pay that, right? But that's this is marketing stuff. You will actually see marketing terms in these campaigns, right? Threat campaign, attack campaign, right? Conversion rates are actually used. You can go down and they will tell you, Stampado has a higher conversion rate than, right? And that is what it is. This is big business. That's all it is. It's not the days of, hack the Gibson, get a rep for what you're doing. It's how much money you can make. And then you start to get into some of the scarier sides. Truthfully, paying $50 to save my nest, I'd probably do it. If Brickerbot hit me and I lost my nest, I'm going to pay it. Thing cost me $130, so it's going to happen. Pacemaker? One of the most popular versions of a pacemaker that was being built had 8,000 known, documented vulnerabilities in the libraries and procedures used to create it. 8,000. And that is a piece of device that is in your body. What is frightening is you can actually buy these things on eBay as well. I mean, they're technically biohazard when they come out of a body. Somebody's in the back dumpster diving it. I don't know. They're washing them off, selling them on eBay. And there was a guy, and I don't know who it was. I'm trying to track him down, who hooked one of these things up to a laptop, recoded it, and pumped 280 volts through the laptop and fried it. Now picture what that does to you, right? You're dead. So how much are you going to pay? Right? Tesla. Any electric car. I love the car hacks because they're creative, they're brilliant. Will they be used to kill somebody? Probably not. Will they be used to get $50 out of you every morning before you get to start your car? Probably. That is where it's going to go because you can generate a lot more money, right? And in fact, if you start to coordinate things like, I happen to know you have a job interview today, I'm going to lock your car, right? Or you've got a huge meeting with a multi-million-dollar deal. They're going to see coordinated attacks between data information because of who you are and what you're doing and some of these devices that go with it. Impact of one wrong download, right? This stuff happens in minutes. That's 93% of the infection happens in minutes. The exfiltration happens in days. The Brian Krebs call happens 2 years later, right? When he figures it out and calls you up. Your shit's been out there for years, right? This is how fast it happens. Ponum is now saying that the average cost of a breach in the US is $7 million. But we know that some of these are massive. Some of these are massive. It'd be interesting to see what Equifax ends up being, what the final cost of that whole thing ends up. So how do we defend ourselves? Well, first, I am a huge, huge proponent of defense in depth, not checkbox security. Far too many people think defense in depth is I am going to go buy one of everything, I'm going to install them, and I'm good. And it's not. The reality is, and I say this to anyone, and if any vendor in that room out there says they have 100% or are perfect, walk away, including my guys. If you hear my guys saying anything like that, tell me. Because the reality is, defense in depth is when a vulnerability is found or something fails. Zscaler stuff is going to break. It's going to stop working. It will happen. That is the world we live in. The unfortunate world will be if it all stops working at once. But the reality is you have to look at your business, and security people have to change their attitude and their mentality. You can't be 100% hands-on keyboard, face down. You have to understand the business that you're in, the business you're working for. If you're a contractor, you need to know what their business is because you need to know what's important to them. Because the reality is, it happens. How do you minimize the damage when it does happen, right? If Equifax had half a brain in its collective skull around how it was managing leftover files on servers, maybe what happened wouldn't have happened. That's a summation of my point. I'm not saying that is what happened, but my guess is, from the sounds of it and the pieces I've heard, there were a lot of temp files lying around that just gently walked out the door. 60% of today's top 100 sites serve malware. Malvertising. I mean, another marketing term, but it's true. They're using advertising. And in fact, threat actors are paying good money to go out and buy real ad space. Anybody realize that that some of the big ads, like on the Super Bowl, stuff like that, are live auctions right before they go on? I had no idea about this. But they will actually live auction an ad space, because what happens, eBay proved it, we all pay too much when we auction, right? And somebody commits to, I'm going to have that one spot on that one, whatever it is, because there's 14 billion eyes on it, they overpay. They will live auction, they can't check anything that's going out. They're just injecting the ad and letting it run. We got 40% of all content passing through a CDN. Most corporations will trust a CDN. Trust is really becoming a dirty word in our industry. You just can't do it. You have to inspect all traffic that goes through. CDNs will be the first thing that gets whitelisted just because of capacity, typically at an edge. And the one that scares me is 99% of all hashes are good for 58 seconds. That is less than 1 minute before you can regenerate the same malware. And that's where we're getting confused. I think a lot of corporations, a lot of executives are hearing ODay versus APT versus, well, wait a minute, that's the same threat that hit 14 times in my organization. Yeah, it's the same threat. It's been recompiled. It has a different signature, and that's why it's getting past things like antivirus. Right? You have to readdress how you're coming to the table on these things. If you look at the history with network-based security, I am going to say things that really offend some people. I say the network is irrelevant. I don't mean that from anybody who works on networks is irrelevant. What I mean is, from a security perspective, protecting a user, I don't want to care. I can't care what network they're on. The old days of sort of the castle and moat of backhauling stuff through MPLS doesn't work, because so much of what we do now is no longer in the corporate environment. We have to move over to something that is policy-based, that addresses the user all the time, wherever they are. And in fact, if you take a look at what's happened, we used to have sort of the data center, we'd have the corporate environment, we'd have some MPLS coming in, and we used a couple of things on the internet. And then as we started to move out and get more services, more as a service, more cloud services, we ended up addressing or opening ourselves up to more threats. I mean, that's just the reality. We also went to this thing with mobile, where do more with less, right? We started moving people out of the corporate office. I live 14 miles from my office. I'm in the office, I'm going to say 6 times a year, right? Like, I mean, I can sit in the office on a little laptop, or I can sit at home with my twin 28s, right? And this is where I work. I work on stages, or I work in a customer's, or I work somewhere else, or I work from home, right? And a lot of sales guys are doing the hoteling. So we've taken a lot of these employees and moved them out as well. So we've got these contractors that are out there. We've got employees that are out there that need to get back inside. So we've created VPNs. We've taken data center applications, moved them up. O365 is a massive, massive driver. It's crazy, the adoption of O365, because anybody who's ever run an Exchange server knows it sucks. I mean, it is the worst thing to run, right? The logging that comes out of it is absolute garbage, right? So when Microsoft said, hey, we'll host it for you, 82 million people went, yeah, give me it. And then we're taking hardware and we're sending that out to AWS, like I said, right? Why? Because you've got expandability, elasticity. When the big rush comes at Christmas, if you're in the retail industry, you just contract for some more, and then in February you can shrink it back down. This is what the world looks like today. We're still trying to address it with infrastructure-based, network-based security tools, and that's where we've got to start looking at what we do and not everything belongs in the cloud. Not everything belongs in as a service. There are certain things that when you learn your business, you go, that's the piece that stays inside. That stays in my data center. What I do advocate, though, is treat your data center like a service. Do not trust too many corporations have that east-west from corporate office to corporate data center that has nothing more than maybe a firewall sitting on it. And that's got to stop. We have to start even treating our own data centers like a service. Wall them off. Trust nobody. Don't trust your employees. Don't trust your executives. Don't trust your vendors. Inspect everything that goes through them. Make it policy-based and make it user-applicable and make it mobile. if your security is good when they're in the office, and when they leave the office, they have antivirus and maybe a firewall, you're dead in the water. I mean, it's just not going to work anymore. So I'll leave you with a couple of ideas. First, adopt a platform strategy that addresses your gaps. Whatever it is, think of your security as a platform. Whatever security program you're putting together within your organization, think of it as a platform, and how does that platform interoperate? Because once you adopt a platform mentality, things start to look differently as opposed to just components that sit there. Absolutely block. Don't just alert. By the time you alert, it's too late, right? And we're seeing that. WannaCry, NotPetya, Rabbit, all of them. They rip through so fast. You have to block things. And in fact, we have the appetite at the executive level to block and have a false positive. They're a little more accepting of that because the risk of something getting through is too great. I will have and debate the decrypting SSL argument with anybody that would like to have it. You have to crack SSL, right? There is a concept of privacy. There's a concept of doing this correctly, putting the right legal frameworks in place to do it, but you have to open SSL. The days of come use our networks so you work more, stay late, blah, 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 are still there, but it's with the caveat of, hey, we're going to look at some stuff. If you're not in the health industry, don't open health. I mean, don't open, it's not worth the risk. Now you're opening yourself to a bigger risk. Same with banking. If you're not in the finance industry and under one of the financial audit controls, don't open that one. That is too big a risk. Absolutely re-image infected devices. I can't believe that I keep having to say this, but I have heard companies and organizations that I would have thought understood security at its core, and they tend to be people with guns, recovering machines, not re-imaging. It's too expensive and too difficult for them to re-image a machine, so they just pull the malware off it. I mean, the stuff is so advanced today, it's buried so deep, it is going to survive. And absolutely, if I can't say it more, don't trust anything. Inspect everything. It's the world that we live in, but until we change the way we approach our security, we're not going to change the attacks that we see. So I'll leave you with one thought. Cause change and you lead. Accept change and you might survive. You resist change and you will die. It will happen, and it happens over and over again. I think I actually have 1 minute if there's any quick questions. If not, I'm here all day as well. I'll be around if you guys want to talk, debate, SSL, the whole bit. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the rest of the con.